The night my company lost $3.2 billion in European industrial expansion contracts did not begin with a stock market crash, a regulatory freeze, or a hostile corporate takeover. It began with one single armchair being pulled away from table one inside the grand ballroom of the Arden Hotel in Manhattan. The occasion was the annual North American and European Industrial Trade Council Gala, an exclusive black-tie gathering designed to unite transatlantic logistics networks with European manufacturing consortiums. Over 400 chief executive officers, managing directors, private equity partners, and trade ministers filled the dimly lit ballroom beneath towering crystal chandeliers. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne, fine wine, and high-stakes commercial negotiation. While dozens of international logistics agreements were being celebrated across the room, everyone present understood that one single master contract dwarfed all others combined. Near the central raised stage sat Table 1, the primary VIP table reserved for the senior executive leadership of Vanguard Logistics Solutions and the representatives of the Weber Industrial Group. Weber Industrial was a legendary German manufacturing alliance controlling critical industrial component supply chains across Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Western Europe. Their pending 10-year master agreement focused on establishing a unified transatlantic freight, customs clearing, and intermodal transport corridor valued at exactly $3.2 billion. Friedrich Weber, the 66-year-old chairman of the group, was a traditional industrial titan. He came from a respected family that had managed precision manufacturing plants in Bavaria for 3 generations. Friedrich did not care about flashy software demonstrations, buzzword-laden corporate pitches, or sleek digital dashboards. He cared about personal accountability, operational precision, and absolute trust built through years of quiet handshakes, shared risk, and unyielding personal integrity. My name is Dean Vance. At 54 years old, I had spent 28 years in industrial supply chain logistics, the last 15 of which were spent dedicated exclusively to building Vanguard's European operational infrastructure from the ground up. When I first stepped into Vanguard 15 years earlier, the company possessed virtually zero operational footprint in continental Europe. Over 15 years of tireless work, I personally negotiated freight rights through the port of Rotterdam, established rail dispatch hubs outside Leipzig, cleared complex customs frameworks with German federal authorities, and forged personal relationships with over 40 manufacturing CEOs across Bavaria and Baden-Württemberg. Friedrich Weber and I had spent 15 years building our professional partnership through quarterly operational audits, midnight crisis mitigation calls during European rail strikes, and private dinners in Stuttgart. To Friedrich, I was not merely a corporate representative. I was the human guarantee behind Vanguard's operational promises. When I stepped up to Table 1 at 7 o'clock that evening, the gold-embossed place card sitting beside the crystal wine glass explicitly read Dean Vance, Director of European Operations. I unbuttoned my tuxedo jacket, placed my leather operational notebook on the table, and took my assigned seat. Several junior vice presidents from headquarters glanced at my place card and offered polite nods of recognition. I adjusted my silver cufflinks and reviewed my legal notes for the formal contract signing scheduled after dinner. But before I could even unfold my linen napkin, a tall, imposing shadow fell across the white tablecloth. "Excuse me, Dean," a sharp, uninvited voice said from directly behind my right shoulder. "You are sitting in the wrong seat tonight." I turned around slowly to face Gavin Thorne. Gavin was 41 years old, recently appointed as Senior Vice President of Global Strategy and Corporate Restructuring at Vanguard. He was the quintessential modern corporate bureaucrat, a man who had spent his entire career in elite management consulting firms, speaking fluent corporate jargon while holding zero real-world operational experience. Gavin viewed experienced field directors with deep suspicion regarding veteran logistics experts as expensive legacy liabilities that needed to be replaced by automated digital systems. He stood behind my armchair with a practiced, arrogant smirk, adjusting his designer silk tie. "This seat is reserved for Haley tonight," Gavin declared, elevating his voice just enough to capture the attention of the surrounding executive tables. Standing directly behind Gavin was Haley Jensen, a 22-year-old strategy intern who had joined corporate headquarters 3 months earlier after completing an undergraduate business degree. She clutched a corporate-branded iPad against her chest and looked visibly uncomfortable under the bright chandeliers, as dozens of industry leaders turned their heads to watch the interaction unfold. I looked down at the embossed place card sitting on the tablecloth, then looked up calmly into Gavin's eyes. "My name is printed on the place card, Gavin," I replied, keeping my tone perfectly measured and professional. This seating arrangement was finalized 3 weeks ago by the Trade Council Event Committee and approved by executive management. Gavin smiled thinly, taking a half step forward and invading my personal space. "That arrangement was updated internally at 5 o'clock today, Dean. As part of our comprehensive corporate modernization strategy, headquarters is aggressively transitioning away from single-point relationship dependencies. Our enterprise partners must learn to rely on standardized digital platforms and automated client portals rather than individual personalities. Moving forward, Haley will be coordinating client interface and leading communications at Table 1. He snapped his fingers sharply toward a junior strategy analyst standing near the perimeter wall. The analyst hurried forward and handed Gavin a bound leather portfolio. Gavin laid it on the tablecloth, displaying a colorful slide titled Scalable Relationship Transfer Framework. "Nothing personal, Dean," Gavin said smoothly, his voice dripping with condescension. "We need a fresh, agile face representing our digital platform at the main table tonight. You are welcome to find an available chair at the overflow tables in the back near the press section." Gavin placed his hand firmly on the back of my leather armchair and pulled it back 3 inches from the table, motioning for Haley to step forward. The surrounding tables fell completely silent. Dozens of maritime executives, freight directors, and private equity investors watched the confrontation in stunned disbelief. Haley hesitated, glancing nervously between me and the chair, but Gavin motioned sharply with his hand. "Go ahead, Haley. Take the seat right now." I did not raise my voice, nor did I cause a public commotion. I stood up slowly, smoothing the front of my tuxedo jacket. I picked up my leather notebook and looked directly into Gavin Thorne's eyes with absolute clarity. "Gavin," I said softly, my voice carrying cleanly across the silent table, "if you remove me from this chair right now, you can forget about the $3.2 billion waiting in Europe." Gavin let out a quiet, dismissive laugh, shaking his head with amusement. "Don't be dramatic, Dean. Systems run this enterprise, not individual egos. Enjoy your dinner from the overflow section in the back." I picked up my overcoat from the coat check, walked out of the Arden Hotel into the crisp Manhattan night, and left the gala behind without looking back. The atmosphere inside the Arden Hotel ballroom did not immediately implode after I walked out, but an undeniable chill settled over Table 1. Gavin Thorne sat down smoothly in the seat I had just vacated, pulling Haley Jensen into the chair beside him. He adjusted his tux lapels, unbuttoned his jacket, and turned to engage the private equity partners across the table with practiced corporate charm. Gavin believed he had just delivered a masterclass in executive authority and corporate agility. In his eyes, an operational field director was merely an employee who could be reassigned at will, and a multi-billion-dollar client account was nothing more than a digital asset stored within an enterprise database. 30 minutes passed as waiters served the first course. Suddenly, the heavy mahogany doors at the main entrance of the ballroom swung wide open. A hushed whisper swept across the room like a wave as the Trade Council coordinators escorted the German industrial delegation into the hall. At the center of the group walked Friedrich Weber. Standing over 6 feet tall, with silver hair, sharp features, and a tailored charcoal wool suit, Friedrich commanded immediate, natural authority wherever he walked. The Weber Industrial Group's supply agreements represented the undisputed crown jewel of the entire trade conference, and every logistics firm in North America had spent months attempting to secure 5 minutes of his time. Friedrich walked directly toward Table 1, flanked by his chief legal counsel, his managing director of procurement, and his head of European logistics. His sharp blue eyes scanned the seated executives as he approached. He looked at the place cards. He recognized Julian Cross, the chief executive officer of Vanguard Logistics. He saw Gavin Thorne, but when his eyes reached the seat where my name had been printed, he saw 22-year-old Haley Jensen sitting nervously beside a stack of unread presentation folders. Friedrich stopped dead in his tracks 5 feet from the table. The entire 6-member German delegation halted behind him in complete formation. "Where is Dean Vance?" Friedrich asked. His voice was not loud, but it possessed a cold, commanding resonance that instantly silenced the surrounding 4 tables. Julian Cross stood up immediately, forcing a warm, welcoming smile and extending his right hand across the table. "Friedrich, welcome. We are deeply honored to have you join us at Table 1 tonight. Please, take your seat so we can begin our dinner." Friedrich did not reach out to take Julian's hand. He did not move toward the empty armchair. His eyes remained fixed with intense focus on the place card where my name had been replaced. I asked a direct question, "Julian." Friedrich repeated calmly, his voice growing even colder. "Where is Dean Vance?" Gavin Thorne leaned forward, interjecting himself into the conversation with a confident, rehearsed smile. "Mr. Weber, good evening. I am Gavin Thorne, Senior Vice President of Global Strategy and Restructuring. As part of Vanguard's ongoing commitment to enterprise scalability and modern corporate governance, we have restructured our European operations management today. We are transitioning away from legacy single-director reliance and introducing our new agile digital strategy team. Ms. Jensen here will be managing client communications and leading our interface at Table 1 tonight." Haley offered a tight, trembling smile and extended a hand toward Friedrich. "It is a true pleasure to meet you, Mr. Weber," she stammered nervously. Friedrich did not look at Haley. He did not acknowledge her extended hand. Instead, he stared directly into Gavin Thorne's eyes for 5 long, agonizing seconds of complete silence. The surrounding noise in the ballroom died down entirely as executives at neighboring tables turned around in their chairs to watch the confrontation. "You removed him," Friedrich said slowly. It was a blunt statement of absolute fact, not a question. Gavin gave a slight, casual shrug of his shoulders, completely oblivious to the gravity of the situation. "We modernized the account structure, Mr. Weber. Our automated tracking platform, centralized digital dashboard, and cloud logistics framework now manage the operational flow. The system manages the relationship moving forward." Friedrich slowly buttoned the center button of his suit jacket. "For 15 years, he said, his voice cutting through the silent ballroom like a steel blade, "my company has entrusted its primary transatlantic freight corridors to Vanguard Logistics. For 15 years, every single master agreement, every emergency rerouting during European port strikes, and every complex customs clearance crisis in Rotterdam was managed by one man. Dean Vance earned our trust because he knows our factories, he understands our legal frameworks, he respects our culture, and he stands by his personal word." Gavin attempted to interject, holding up his hands. "Mr. Weber, if you will just allow me to walk you through our 5 minutes slide deck. Raise your hand no further." "Mr. Thorne," Friedrich commanded quietly, lifting one finger. "In Germany, we build multi-billion-dollar industrial partnerships between honorable human beings, not corporate flowcharts. Trust is earned through years of proven personal integrity. And trust, Mr. Thorne, is not transferable." Julian Cross's face drained of all color. "Friedrich, please. Let us step into a private executive suite upstairs so we can resolve this misunderstanding calmly." "This meeting is finished," Friedrich declared, his voice echoing across the silent room. "The Weber Industrial Group will not execute any contracts or agreements with Vanguard Logistics Solutions." Without another word, Friedrich turned on his heel and walked out of the ballroom. His entire 6-member executive delegation turned as one and followed him out the doors in total silence. Within 60 seconds, $3.2 billion in contract value vanished from Vanguard's future balance sheet, leaving Gavin Thorne standing alone beside a stack of unread presentation slides. While the unprecedented disaster was taking place inside the Arden Hotel ballroom, I was already driving my sedan south along the rain-slicked pavement of the Hudson River Parkway. The glowing lights of the Manhattan skyline retreated steadily in my rearview mirror as steady rain beat against the windshield. For 15 long years, I had poured my life into building Vanguard's European operational network. I had spent countless holidays away from home, flown hundreds of thousands of miles across the Atlantic, and worked 80-hour weeks to establish trade corridors that turned a mid-sized domestic firm into a global logistics contender. 2 years earlier, I had explicitly warned Chief Executive Officer Julian Cross that hiring aggressive, out-of-touch corporate consultants like Gavin Thorne would dismantle the foundational human relationships that sustained our enterprise. My warnings had been dismissed as traditional resistance to modern digital transformation. My cell phone vibrated sharply on the leather passenger seat. The caller identification displayed Friedrich Weber's private encrypted number from Germany. I signaled, pulled my vehicle onto the paved shoulder of the highway, placed the gear shift in park, and answered the call. "Good evening, Friedrich," I said calmly, keeping my voice steady. "Dean," Friedrich replied immediately. His tone was measured and gravelly, but I could hear the deep, resonant anger beneath his words. "I have just walked out of the Arden Hotel ballroom and left the building entirely." "I assumed that might happen when I left," I said softly. Friedrich paused for a moment before speaking with absolute conviction. "I informed their chief executive officer that our 15-year partnership with Vanguard Logistics is officially terminated. The $3.2 billion master transatlantic contract will not be signed with Vanguard. In my country, serious industrial business is conducted with men of proven honor, not arrogant boys who pull chairs out from under veteran directors to impress their peers. When you decide what your next professional move is, Dean, you call me directly on my personal line." "Thank you, Friedrich," I said. "I deeply appreciate your unwavering loyalty and respect." The line went silent as the call disconnected with a quiet click. I leaned my head back against the headrest, listening to the rhythmic sweep of the windshield wipers against the glass. But before I could even engage the transmission to re-enter traffic, the phone rang a second time. The screen illuminated with the name Stefan Becker. Stefan Becker was the 58-year-old chief executive officer of Becker Euro Industrial Network, Vanguard's primary transatlantic logistics rival based in Frankfurt and Stuttgart. Stefan was a brilliant, aggressive strategist who had built Becker into a powerhouse across Central and Eastern Europe. "Dean," Stefan exclaimed the moment I answered, his voice crackling with energy. "News moves like lightning across the Trade Council network. My senior VP just called me from the ballroom. He told me Gavin Thorne just humiliated himself, stripped your seat for an intern, and watched Friedrich Weber walk out on a $3.2 billion contract in front of 400 people." "Word moves fast in our industry," I remarked with a slight smile. Stephen laughed heartily over the line. "Gavin Thorne is a foolish corporate drone who thinks global freight infrastructure can be managed like a social media account. I have been trying to recruit you to Becker Euro Industrial for 3 years, Dean. Tonight made the timing undeniable. I am offering you the position of President of European Operations with complete executive autonomy, a seat on our executive board, and a substantial equity partnership. Build the network the way it was meant to be built." "What about the legal covenants?" I asked directly. Vanguard's legal department forced all senior executives to sign standard non-compete agreements. Stefan hesitated slightly, but I continued before he could consult his legal team. "I had spent years preparing for this exact contingency. Vanguard's corporate legal team made a fatal oversight 6 years ago," I explained to Stefan. "In 2018, when I single-handedly developed our proprietary dynamic freight routing, customs clearing, and tariff optimization software, I retained independent legal counsel. I registered the core source code, trade algorithms, and database architecture under my personal name with the United States Copyright Office, under Title 17, United States Code, Section 106. I granted Vanguard a non-exclusive, non-transferable personal license that automatically terminates upon the severance or termination of my employment. Vanguard does not own the underlying intellectual property. I own it outright." Stefan let out a long, low whistle through the receiver. "Under Section 106, you hold the exclusive legal rights to reproduce, prepare derivative works, distribute, and license that routing framework. If Vanguard attempts to process European freight using your software without your active employment, they are committing willful federal copyright infringement." "Precisely," I said. And furthermore, Gavin Thorne's unilateral action in revoking my operational authority at the gala violated the corporate master agency agreement, rendering their attempted transfer of my account management void ab initio, completely void from the beginning under corporate agency law. Stephen let out a booming laugh. Pack your bags for Germany, Dean. We have a historic press conference to host in Frankfurt on Monday morning. 3 days later, I was sitting in the executive boardroom on the top floor of Becker Euro Industrial Network's corporate headquarters in Frankfurt, Germany. The floor-to-ceiling glass walls offered a breathtaking view of the Frankfurt financial skyline and the silver ribbon of the River Main below. Across the polished dark oak table sat Chief Executive Officer Stefan Becker, his managing directors, and senior corporate counsel. Beside my right hand lay a leather-bound executive employment contract. At precisely 9 o'clock that Monday morning, I picked up a fountain pen and officially signed the contract, assuming the position of President of European Operations for Becker Euro Industrial Network. Less than 10 minutes after the ink dried on my signature, the heavy oak boardroom door opened smoothly. Friedrich Weber walked into the room, accompanied by his chief legal officer and managing director of procurement. There were no lengthy slide presentations or corporate speeches. Friedrich walked straight to the head of the table, extended his hand, and gave me a firm, warm handshake. Then he sat down beside me and executed the 10-year Master Transatlantic Freight Corridor Agreement between Weber Industrial Group and Becker Euro Industrial Network. The master contract value was $3.2 billion over 10 years, the exact deal that Vanguard Logistics had arrogantly thrown away 3 nights earlier in Manhattan. In Germany, trust moves far faster than corporate bureaucracy, Friedrich remarked quietly as he capped his pen and handed the signed documents to his legal team. Over the following 3 weeks, a catastrophic chain reaction ripped through Vanguard Logistics. The European manufacturing and industrial sector operates as a tightly integrated ecosystem. Plant managers, shipping directors, and corporate procurement officers communicate continuously through regional trade associations. When news swept across Europe that Weber Industrial had transferred its entire transatlantic logistics pipeline to Becker under my operational leadership, secondary manufacturing clients immediately began auditing their own contracts with Vanguard. A major Bavarian automotive component supplier canceled their $45 million annual shipping contract with Vanguard, citing the total loss of trusted operational oversight. 48 hours later, a massive chemical export conglomerate in the Rhine Valley followed suit, terminating an $80 million logistics agreement. Within 28 days of the Manhattan Gala, Vanguard lost over $420 million in secondary European accounts, on top of the $3.2 billion Weber disaster. Back in New York, Gavin Thorne plunged into full-blown panic. Desperate to prove that Vanguard could operate the European freight corridors without my personal involvement, Gavin issued an emergency directive to Vanguard's IT department. He ordered engineers to bypass system access controls, copy my proprietary dynamic routing software, and deploy it across Vanguard's European server infrastructure in Rotterdam and Frankfurt. Our legal team at Becker was monitoring Vanguard's network activity around the clock. The moment Vanguard deployed the copied code, we struck with surgical legal precision. We filed an emergency motion for an ex-parte preliminary injunction in the United States District Court for the Southern District of New York, alleging willful federal copyright infringement under Title 17, United States Code, Section 106. The presiding federal judge reviewed our documentation, recognized my personal copyright registration, and issued an immediate temporary restraining order. Vanguard was legally forced to shut down its entire European tracking and custom software within 48 hours under threat of massive daily contempt sanctions. Deprived of both experienced operational leadership and functional routing software, Vanguard's European logistics network suffered total operational paralysis. Hundreds of cargo containers sat stranded at the port of Rotterdam. Customs clearance declarations were rejected by German authorities in Hamburg, and supply chain delays cost transatlantic clients millions of dollars in daily manufacturing downtime. Panicking under the weight of mounting financial losses, Gavin Thorne attempted a reckless corporate cover-up. To artificially offset the staggering revenue losses on Vanguard's upcoming quarterly financial report, Gavin initiated immediate emergency cost-cutting measures. He issued termination notices to 92 senior logistics managers and operational directors across Vanguard's regional offices without advance warning. However, in his arrogant haste, Gavin completely failed to comply with federal labor law, specifically the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, known universally as the Warnin Act. Under Title 29, United States Code, Section 2101, under the Warnin Act, enterprise employers with more than 100 full-time workers are legally mandated to provide at least 60 calendar days advance written notice prior to executing mass layoffs or plant closures. Within 72 hours of the illegal terminations, the United States Department of Labor launched a formal federal investigation into Vanguard Logistics Solutions. Simultaneously, a prominent labor law firm filed a massive class-action lawsuit on behalf of the 92 terminated managers, exposing Vanguard to mandatory back pay liabilities, full employee benefits payouts, and severe statutory fines. The compounding crisis reached its dramatic climax 6 weeks later during Vanguard Logistics Solutions' emergency quarterly shareholder meeting in Manhattan. Over the preceding 2 months, Vanguard's public stock price had collapsed by 42%, wiping out over $1.8 billion in market capitalization. The corporate auditorium at headquarters was packed to capacity with furious institutional investors, pension fund managers, Wall Street analysts, and legal representatives. Chief Executive Officer Julian Cross stood trembling at the podium, attempting to present a sanitized, optimistic corporate presentation, attributing the losses to macroeconomic headwinds. But the mandatory question and answer session quickly devolved into an unprecedented shareholder revolt. A prominent trial attorney representing a syndicate of public employee pension funds stood up at the center microphone and presented a formal demand for immediate board intervention. The attorney detailed a devastating cause of action for breach of fiduciary duty under state corporate governance statutes. Julian Cross and Gavin Thorne had flagrantly violated their fiduciary duties of care, loyalty, and good faith by allowing Gavin Thorne's reckless personal arrogance to alienate the company's primary operational director and strip his seat for an intern. Corporate management had intentionally wasted a $3.2 billion commercial asset. Furthermore, Gavin's illegal deployment of copyrighted software and blatant violation of the Federal Warnin Act had subjected the enterprise to unmanageable civil penalties and criminal exposure. Before the shareholder meeting even concluded, Vanguard's outside independent directors convened an emergency executive session in an adjacent boardroom. The board voted unanimously to strip Julian Cross of his executive authority, forcing his immediate retirement without a severance bonus. Simultaneously, the board terminated Gavin Thorne for cause, stripping him of all unvested stock options, revoking his executive clawback protections, and authorizing corporate legal counsel to name Gavin as a primary co-defendant in the ongoing shareholder lawsuits. 3 months after that fateful night in Manhattan, I settled comfortably into my permanent office in Stuttgart, Germany. Becker Euro Industrial Network had opened a modern, state-of-the-art European operational headquarters situated near the heart of Germany's industrial manufacturing hub. The office featured floor-to-ceiling glass walls, advanced logistics monitoring arrays, and a dedicated team of veteran operational logistics specialists. That evening, I met Friedrich Weber for dinner at a historic, candlelit restaurant, nestled in the hills overlooking Stuttgart. We sat in a private dining room beside a crackling stone fireplace, enjoying a bottle of rare German wine. To long-term continuity, operational excellence, and mutual respect, Friedrich said warmly, raising his crystal glass across the table. To honor, integrity, and trust, I replied, raising my glass to touch his glass. As we spent the evening discussing our multi-billion-dollar expansion plans into Eastern European rail corridors for the upcoming fiscal year, my mind briefly wandered back to that evening at the Arden Hotel in Manhattan. Gavin Thorne had genuinely believed that an executive title gave him absolute power, that an inexperienced intern could replace 15 years of dedicated human fieldwork, and that corporate slide decks could override genuine human trust. He thought he was simply pulling a chair away from a dinner table to demonstrate corporate control. In reality, he was pulling the single critical pin that held a $3.2 billion enterprise together. In the fast-paced, high-stakes world of global enterprise business, automated systems and digital dashboards can organize data, but personal trust commands the market. And those who arrogantly forget that timeless truth will inevitably watch their corporate empires collapse into ruin. Looking back on the entire ordeal, the lessons extend far beyond logistics, trade treaties, or corporate boardrooms. In the modern corporate era, ambitious young executives often fall into the trap of believing that human relationships can be commoditized, digitized, and automated without consequence. They look at corporate spreadsheets and see only numbers, entirely ignoring the years of handshakes, late-night problem-solving, emergency port visits, and personal sacrifices that made those multi-billion-dollar numbers possible in the first place. Gavin Thorne learned that lesson in the most brutal and expensive way imaginable, costing his company $3.2 billion in direct revenue, destroying his own professional reputation, and exposing himself to permanent legal and financial ruin. For myself, standing in our new Stuttgart regional office looking out over the thriving industrial hub of Central Europe, I knew that true commercial success is never built on hollow titles or arbitrary executive authority. It is built on unyielding personal honor, deep technical mastery, and the unshakable, earned trust of the people you work alongside every single day. When you hold those values close, no corporate executive can ever pull your seat away from the table of victory.